I think at this point we're looking for any bright spots in the industry. So certainly there's capacity to fill in Iran. I think Bombardier is positioned to enter that market and participate. But of course, like any transaction, you've got to be cautious and exercise caution in moving forward. So nobody's turning away buyers, and if you can find the right deal, sure, we'll do business in Iran.
Well, Iran, I think you're more excited if you're in the commercial airline business or in the parts business for right now. I think in the corporate jet market, absolutely, there is a huge potential there. There's a lot of money that's in the, if you want to call it the hidden underground, and there's a big, big potential. Is it this year or next year? No. But is it 5 years? It probably could start seeing some activity in 5 years.
I think Iran is an interesting, opens an interesting door because we are not allowed to finance. There are a number of countries where there is a lot of wealth and there is need for business aviation. However, for compliance reasons and because banks are increasingly responsible for cleaning the economy and making sure that the payments are perfectly transparent, we are not always able to finance clients in these countries. So Middle East will remain a difficult area, like Africa, because it's not only because the sanctions have been waived that everything is possible. So step by step, we'll probably resume financing Iranian clients, but it will not be business as usual immediately.
So there's been a lot of excitement about Iran, and I say Iran, more particularly the relief or the lifting of secondary sanctions associated with Iran's compliance with various nuclear requirements in the Joint Commission Action Plan. I think, yes, most people are excited for no apparent reason, and I'll explain. The fact of the matter is that the agreement reached between the P5 parties, or the relevant parties involved, do allow for commercial aircraft and spare parts and services associated with the implementation of the agreement. However, there's a specific carve-out for business aircraft, cargo aircraft, utility aircraft. So for corporate jet investors have been carved out. Now, when you say, well, you could perhaps use some of these corporate aircraft as commercial passenger aircraft, but the fact of the matter is, you have to still obtain a license from the U.S. government. And so most licenses are analyzed very narrowly. And that's not to say you are not going to, or a person or an applicant may not get or will be denied a license, but the submission process requires significant motivation, or significant justification. And so once you submit that, you're looking at a process probably several weeks. Time kills deals. And so if you're working on somebody that requires a lot of time or doesn't mind if this application process requires maybe even months, then I think you have a good opportunity. At the end of the road, it may get denied. So if you have a seller that's willing to wait that time, then sure, it costs virtually nothing to submit an application. And what's the worst they can say? No. So if you actually think that you have a legitimate basis for approval from the U.S. government, there's no harm in submitting it other than the potential cost administratively. But the regulations are written very clearly that business aircraft are carved out. And I will say this, it doesn't eliminate most of the sanctions that were in place prior to the nuclear sanctions. These are only secondary sanctions. All of the other terrorist-related sanctions remain in place. And so when someone suggests that the sanctions are lifted, now, a very small portion of the sanctions were lifted. All of the other ones remain in place, and particularly for U.S. citizens, we still have to comply and adhere to those sanctions. And I will say this, one other thing with respect to, well, what if I'm selling a non-U.S. manufactured aircraft? Well, the regulations are written such that any aircraft that has 10% more of U.S. content, which is virtually every aircraft, are also subject by the sanctions. And when I say the sanctions, I will also add not only OFAC, or the Department of Treasury, but you also have to comply with the Department of Commerce, Bureau of Industry and Securities requirements, specifically the entity list and the denied person list. And those are targeting the actual asset or the aircraft, whereas the Treasury sanctions, OFAC, are targeting people and financial transactions.